What's up, guys? I will talk about the inghams. So, tonight was the night that they uploaded Esme's birthday present opening vlog. Now, obviously, I watched it. I watched it briefly. I didn't watch all of it, but the one thing you can tell when you watch a lot of the birthday vlogs and things like that is just how fake, staged, and rehearsed a lot of the reactions are. It's the same with the Christmas vlogs in a way. When you watch those, again, you can sort of see just how fake, staged, and rehearsed the reactions are. You know, I do feel sorry for the kids because I imagine that they are. I imagine that they're under a lot of pressure to get their reactions right. Because I can't imagine that their parents would be too happy if they, weren't, if they did, if they didn't get their reactions right or they didn't react the way that that their parents had told them to react. But I think, that's the one thing that's become obvious when you watch Unums, is that, like when you watch the birthday vlogs, is that the kids are only really reacting the way that their parents have actually told them to react. They're not reacting like the reactions are not at all genuine. They're only reacting the way their parents have actually told them to react. You know, it's so clear to see that. It really is. Like, there's no denying how fake it actually is. Um, I mean, as I said, I think I imagine a conversation does a bit like this. Right, it does a bit like this, right? Remember how important it is to get your reactions right, and remember how important it is that you react the way we told you to react. As the view, we need those reactions for the extra views. So it's so important that you get your reactions right. I can't imagine the amount of pressure that is being put on his behind the scenes to be, to make sure that they get their reactions right and that they react the way their parents have told them to react. Um, and it's sad to think about the fact that that sort of pressure is put, is being put on the kids. Obviously, that those kids, the kids are sort of, under so much pressure to get those reactions right. But the thing is with the kids, obviously that they know by now how important it is that they get their reactions right and how important it is that they react the way that their parents have told them to react. As we know that Sarah and Christy, obviously will want to make sure that they get the extra views, and it's the reactions that tend to bring in the extra views, which is why it's so important that the kids are getting their reactions right, because it's so that the reactions are actually bringing in those extra views. If they don't get their reactions right, they won't bring in, and those reactions won't bring in the extra views. So that's why the kids are under so much pressure to be making sure they get their reactions right. It's like, it's so that it's so that their parents are getting those extra views, and you know no child, at the end of the day, no child should be under that sort of pressure. No child should be under that sort of pressure to be making sure that they're getting their reactions right and things like that. But I imagine that's the sort of pressure that those kids face a lot of the time. They face that pressure of making sure that they're actually getting their reactions right because of how important it is that they get their reactions right. Because, at the end of the day, there's no denying that it is very important that they do that. I think we've all known that. I think we all know how important that is. And it's just sad. Like that's just I feel to me like that's the saddest part of these birthday vlogs is just how fake and staged and rehearsed a lot of the reactions are, and you can really tell just how fake, staged, and rehearsed they really are. You can really tell that the reactions are not in any way genuine at all. There's nothing genuine about these reactions. And I've really, over, as time has gone on, and the amount of birthday vlogs that they put out, and obviously the amount of birthday vlogs I've watched, you start to know, you really start to notice that, and as time has gone on, you've really started to notice that with the inghams. You've really started to notice just how fake and staged and rehearsed the reactions are. And obviously it's the same thing with the Christmas vlogs as well. When you watch them again, you can sort of see just how fake and staged and rehearsed the reactions are, and you can sort of see just how much pressure those hits are is being put on those hits to be made, to make sure to be getting their reactions right. We all know how important it is for them to do that. We know that when it comes to the birthday vlogs and Christmas vlogs, the extra view, that the parents will want to make sure they get their extra views, and his reactions is what brings in the extra views, and the parents know that. So they'll obviously be putting a lot of pressure on their kids to make sure that the kids are getting their reactions right, because the parents know that his reactions is what brings in the extra views, you know. And that's been clear to see for a very long time, that it is that his reactions that does bring in the extra views, So there you go. I mean, is it really that harsh to say that the reactions are so fake and rehearsed and staged? I don't think it's that harsh, because it's the truth at the end of the day. Those reactions are completely fake. You know, everything about the inghams is fake. You can tell that those kids have been, when you look at the vlogs and you look at the way the kids are reacting, you can tell that they're only reacting the way that they've been told to react by their parents. They're only reacting the way that their parents have told them to react. It's so clear to see. Like, how can people not see that the kids are only reacting the way their parents have told them to react? Surely anyone can see that. Surely anyone can see just how much pressure is being put on these kids to make sure that they're getting their reactions right for the vlog, for these kind of vlogs. It's these kind of vlogs, is where the parents really want to get the extra views. Because it's the birthday vlogs and the Christmas vlogs that usually bring in a decent amount of views. And that is what they're always focusing on. And the reactions are the big part, and his reactions are the big part of the reasons why the sort of the birthday vlogs and the Christmas vlogs tend to get those extra views, you know. And as I said, it's just sad to think that to imagine that sort of pressure is being put on his. But I don't think it's unfair to say that that's the sort of pressure that's being put on his. Because I think we all know that is the sort of pressure that is being put on these kids, is to make if they know, you know it's so important to that they react the right way. Because when I think about it, like I imagine that Chris and Sarah would probably be absolutely fuming if the kids didn't get their reactions right, or the kids weren't reacting the way that they didn't react, or weren't reacting the way that they had told them to react. You know, I can't imagine that Chris and Sarah would be too happy about that. You know, and I think that kids know that. I think that kids know that if they didn't get their reactions, that their parents wouldn't be happy if they didn't get their reactions right, or they didn't react the way that their parents had told them to react. And they know, which is what which is the thing. Like, they know that they have to react a certain way. If they don't react the way that they don't react that certain way, their parents won't be happy about it. And I think that's the harsh reality of it. Is that these kids are under so much pressure to get their reactions right, because they know how angry their parents will be if they don't. Because if the kids don't get their reactions right, the parents don't get those extra views. And that's what these parents care about, is what brings in the extra views. And it's his reactions that do that. And if his don't get their reactions right, that's not going to bring in the extra views. It's sad to think about, but it's the reality. That's the reality of it. The reality of it is, if the kids don't get their reactions right, they don't. They wouldn't get it. They wouldn't get those extra views. So it is so important that the kids get those reactions right. And it's sad to think about the fact that that sort of pressure is being put on those kids. that those kids are under that sort of pressure to make sure that they react the right way, or that they react the way their parents have told them to react. Um, I mean, that has to be said. I think it's one of those points that really genuinely has to be made. The fact is that the kids are under a lot of pressure to make sure that they're getting their reactions right and that they're reacting the way that their parents want them to, or have told them to react, or that that they're reacting the way their parents have told their parents want them to react. As I said, this is the thing when you watch the birthday vlogs and the Christmas vlogs, you can see that the kids are only reacting the way that their parents want them to react, or that they've been told, or their parents have told them to react. You know, nothing ever feels genuine or real about the kids' reactions at all. It only ever feels like they're reacting the way that their parents have told them to react. That's what it always feels like. Whenever you watch these kind of vlogs, it always just feels like the kids are just reacting the way their parents have told them to react. It really genuinely does. And I don't know how people can't see that the kids are only reacting the way their parents have told them to react, and that the reactions are not at all real, not at all real. And I can't understand how people can't see just how fake these reactions are. You know, because the reactions are absolutely 100% fake. I'm not saying that the kids are obviously not happy, but I'm just saying that the kids have obviously been told to make sure that they get their reactions right. That's what they're probably, that's a conversation their parents are having with them before they start filming. Is they're having that conversation with them about making sure they get their reactions right, and that they're making sure they react the way their parents have told them to react. And obviously, I imagine that I don't know what sort of consequences they would face if they didn't react the way their parents told them to, or they didn't get their reactions right. But the thing is, the reactions have probably been rehearsed, a few times at least. They probably, it's just sad to think about, and it's sad to think about the pressure that's being put on these kids to make sure that they're getting their reactions right and that they're reacting the way their parents have told them to, purely because their parents want those extra views. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing that pressure that's being put on these kids to make sure they're getting their reactions right. And as I said, the kids know how important it is. That they know that their parents won't be happy if they don't get their reactions right, or they don't react the way their parents have told them to. They know their parents would be absolutely fuming. And I imagine, like when you look at the kids, I think you can really tell how scared those kids are of getting their reactions wrong. You can see that. You can really, really see that. You can really see just how scared the kids are of getting their reactions wrong. There's no denying that. As I imagine these kids are probably very, very scared of getting their reactions wrong because they know their parents would be happy about that. They know their parents would be absolutely fuming. So they're really trying to make sure they get those reactions right, purely to keep their parents happy. Purely because they know that if they don't get their reactions wrong, their parents would be absolutely fuming, and the kids don't want that. The kids, it's just sad, it really is. I just wanted to come on and give my thoughts on that. I thought, it would be a decent video to do. I felt the need to give my thoughts on that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway. I'll see you for another one tomorrow. Bye bye.